Identification is our preservation. Let me say that again for the people in the back and in overflow. Identification is our preservation. And if not checked, if not in awareness of who we are, is our devastation. It will be the very tool that brings us down. And yes, I'm talking about that solar plexus energy, the identity body, the mental body, and how you think of yourself is how you exist as yourself. So, knowing who we are in our higher sense of self worth, in our truest sense of self worth, is how we're going to truly preserve. That's true preservation. Now, as I'm saying this, I saw as I was meditating two ways of receiving this. Tack on the throat. Let me clear my throat for the truth to come out and for the lies to be revoked. Ashe, ashe. The preservation can be looked at in two ways. There's malevolent, which is bad, and there's the benevolence, which is good. In which way are we utilizing preservation? And when we are in the lower realms of self-worth, we are hiding under the mask of self-preservation when we are really under a task of protecting our fears. We have put our ego in task of protecting our fears, which is the natural presence of the ego. That is, we're hardwired to protect ourselves. That's part of our self-defense mechanism chip that is within our consciousness. It's not bad. It's just bad when it goes beyond its expired date. The ego in its protection is wired to help us, which is good. But there's an expiration date. There's a warranty with this ego's service onto thee. And so when that warranty is up, it is our responsibility to check back in with self and remove the temporary story that was told to cope with certain hurts and pains and wounds that need to now be addressed with truth and revelations. Now, I say all that because that determines the malevolence or the benevolence of the self, of the preservation of the identification of our identity individually and collectively. And this is what we are seeing plagued. We have been plagued with this, and we're seeing it play out in our atmosphere, geopolitically, familial wise, in the families, in society, societal wise, and in humanity. Across the board, but we're seeing what that identification has done. And so what we want to look at is whether you are under preservation of benevolence, through benevolence or through malevolence. How it happens through benevolence, and this happened out of a conversation. What I'm sharing with you now is insight, hindsight, and even foresight from something that has happened in our past with our people, looking at how we fear to do certain things through families or just as a people in developing. We were talking about basically how to make how we're making babies differently, not how to make babies, but if you notice through generations, how in some cultures they're not making babies. Like even in places in Europe, they don't have their elderly is in a threat. There's a big age gap, and they haven't really been creating. And so they haven't been creating because they have been cultured not to. Not that I want to go too deep into it, but in seeing all of that, we see that there's a false sense of preservation through what I call cultured education. And we'll talk about that later. I coined that. I never heard it before, but that's what it seems to be called, cultured education, because not all education is education. It's what we're cultured to believe in, again, through our identity, through a false sense of preservation, because in the malevolence of it, they want to preserve their fears, their loss, their wounds. They want to preserve that. And through their fears and through lack and limitation, our society, our family, past self, even us, have been wired. Our ego gets wired to protect its wounds. So when it has been hurt in whatever way it has, there is a wound there, and the ego goes into protection mode and therefore puts up a mask of self-preservation. And so things are done that we think should be a part of society or tradition or family because of false sense of self, because of a lower sense of self that is wired through a misappropriated ego to protect under the disguise of self-preservation. So that is the malevolence. The benevolence is that when we live in a higher sense of self, we allow the energy, which is all in our blood, the energetic codes that are in our DNA, to vibrate at a higher frequency. We know who we are in our higher sense of self-worth. We are empowered by the divine's will. So we don't drop into lower personal will of trying to preserve the self in a selfish way, or maybe sometimes in a sadistic way. However, we are empowered by ourself of knowing who we are, and we are wired under truth to exemplify true spiritual identity as we exist on this plane, not to outdo, compete, prove ourselves to anyone, whether individually or collectively. And so this would be, and in doing that, the truth of you is preserved in the blood, and it is carried on in the bloodline, down the line, through the families. It's passed on through even learned behaviors with, through society, because of how you are empowered to be and how you exemplify that empowerment transfers over. And so in that way, the benevolence of self-preservation is in the happening. You don't have to fight to preserve self. You don't have to annihilate another race or generation. You don't have this sense of competition and compare so that you can feel better, because you know who you are, and who knows better, do better, and who knows better is better. That is a higher sense of true identity and true self. So with that said, it is with an understanding of knowing who we are, then we know where we stand, and we know the true start and the travails of where we go. We know the true start of our star. That's what I was thinking. It's like, you know who you are, and you know you're the star. I don't know why I was holding it back. It's like, you just say it like how it's coming out. You know who you are, and you know you're the star. And as that star seed, you don't have to try to protect a false identity, and there's nothing to push up against or self-preserve. Full story, bringing that full circle, 360 and up in elevation, which is a spiral. Basically, when you stand on who you are, you have a positive sense of self, and the self-preservation will be automatically happening, right? So you won't have to preserve self. So for those who are saying, well, I have to do this because we got to keep it this way, we got to keep it in the family, we got to keep it in our culture, we got to keep it in humanity, you don't have to fight particularly to do anything. Study war no more. This is the wisdom and the maturation of Mars as we are entering into Aries today. Tomorrow, we're in the portal of the entering into Aries, Saturn, Neptune, and this is the fire that we're coming with. And the fire is also the element of the solar plexus. So let's fire up our true identity and not fall for false sense of security. And that is a true self-preservation in the benevolence of it all. So join us this weekend to tap into that true identity. Peace, love, and light.